Hi.
Hi,
Oh, Tommy.
hi, Tommy Lee.
Hi, Tommy.
Tommy Lee.
How are you?
Hi.
Here.
This I shared here.
Can you hear me? Yeah,
Yes, we can.
Do you hear us?
Hi, Julie.
Yes.
Start.
Yeah, it starts to clear up. Like, I think maybe it needs to like get movement so it can focus.
Yeah. Hello. Oh, I was gonna text you. Thank you for coming. That's great. Yeah. I want to see it.
It's a reaction.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we'll do it at the end.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's somewhere. There.
We're on
page
15.
Good morning, folks. I see it. Here's your view. You don't see it. Something that is from page 16. How was the show, guys? That's something to do. Oh, went pretty good. Pretty good. More dancing. Yes, we were nuts. Yeah.
Not think we were moshing deep. Yeah, there's 4 there.
Well, yeah, go ahead and take one of those. I think we're on page 16.
15.
15. And feel free to pull up a chair,
Yeah.
some pillows if it's uncomfy. And you don't have to get that pillow. If you can take it. Nap in the other. Brendan says, good evening. Hello, Brendan. Very good. Yeah, sure. See you later. We have miles.
So a few weeks ago, we were covering the article called Dual Aspect of Wisdom. It's a shorter article, and we went through a couple weeks, and then we decided to go to a more in-depth article, Psychic and Noetic Action. So we've been going through it the last couple Sundays. We go kind of slow because it's pretty kind of deep, the article. And but it also, in the various articles that we go through from Judge and Blavatsky, he talks about higher and lower mind and how they function, which is a key thing, is understanding how our principles function. So that's why we decided it would be good to look at this article, Psychic and Noetic Action, because it's explaining like psychic action is not just entailing psychic like we would think of when you see someone store the advertising as a psychic and they can tell bits about your personal history or maybe your future. But also it entails all the stuff that we just normally do with our everyday mind. We balance checkbooks, we figure out a schedule, people invent stuff, people engineer stuff, people work as nurses and doctors, people work as teachers. That's all lower mind that's doing that. The noetic mind, or the higher mind, we could say is a spiritual mind that is working through the lower mind when it can. And so that's what she's explaining in this article, and it'll take us a few weeks to go through, is that what science is calling mind and how they look at it is like part of it. She talks about motions of atoms and stuff, or she'll say the chemists talk about it's all biology. She said it's the mind that is causing the biology. It's not the biology is causing the mind. And so she'll quote different scientific ideas at the time and then give an explanation of why the occult teaching is different. And a lot of times she even uses just pure logic as to how their logic is wrong. And it's good to look at when she's doing an explanation, because she's also not just explaining occultism, she's explaining how to use your lower mind and logic to analyze some of the stuff that people are saying just for your own judgment. So how do you develop judgment? Not based on what you've just been taught, but what's a logical process? Are what they saying really logical? If you even look at it from their perspective, you can see that sometimes in their logical perspective, there's flaws. And like any scientist that makes a discovery, then other scientists in the field have to duplicate that discovery. If they find a flaw in the discovery, then they're like, okay, we got to go back and something's not right. You did something, none of us can make it. So anyway, that's all.
Discuss this last week.
Yeah, a little louder so that people
Like a glitch in the matrix.
like a glitch in the matrix. Yeah. And that's, we have a lot of different movies, or we'll have stories or, themes of ancient fables that point to a lot of these ideas if you're looking at it from an occult perspective. So like you brought up, we were talking about the Matrix. What is the Matrix? Well, the movie is based on a whole separate life that's really run by computers, and your brain is plugged into a computer. But the occult aspect of it is all of our minds are linked. And so you either are aware of the connection or you're not aware of the connection. So anyway.
I was going to say, does it go in the direction, do robots have consciousness? I don't know.
Well, that's what, we brought this up last week too, because there was like a current scientist. I mean, material science is still trying to understand mind based on like physics. There was the Maria Strom, who wrote an article about trying to understand consciousness through physics and mathematics. But also Blavatsky says there's physics, then there's metaphysics, and then hyperphysics. So you might not necessarily be able to understand the mind just with physics, which is this, on the phenomenal plane. And then the metaphysics is the astral plane, hyperphysics, the more spiritual. So when we're talking about the noetic, it's more of this hyperphysics, metaphysics, and hyperphysics. Specifically hyperphysics.
If you think a lot of people are just
No, that were really fast, like energy shifting, higher energy.
well, yeah, I could say a higher energy vibration. And see, we're in the in the era of AI, where AI is really taking hold in the culture. And there's a lot of talk about AI being conscious. So if you think about it for a second, without defining consciousness, AI, if it took everything that has ever been written and in books, and on tapes, and in recordings, and in movies, that's everything that's been recorded. And it's using that to make judgments and intelligence. But what does it leave out? If it's looking at a book that Paracelsus wrote, and he wrote a few books, and some people even were able to understand what he was writing because he was writing at a time where it wasn't really very safe to write what he was writing about, but he still wrote anyway. The difference between your consciousness and consciousness from the way occult looks at it is that there's planes of consciousness we all participate in. So the difference is AI can collate all the books that have been written, all the papers, and explaining the commentaries about what he's done. The occultist can connect to how he thought and what he really understood about that. So now you're not reading something that he wrote, and we all know when we write something, it's based on what we know and what we understand. But a lot of times we're not that clear about what we're even writing. So when we write something, I mean, a good example is email. You send someone an email and it's short, and they get it and they're offended by the way that you presented it. You didn't mean to offend anyone. You didn't even think that they could interpret it as being offensive, but they took, they felt offended by it. So that's a different way of looking. It's you could say, that the AI, and we're going to get a lot of benefits from it, but like every invention, we're going to get a lot of problems from it. Sebastian,
does this relate to? I think we talked about this previously. A couple weeks ago, like the noetic knowing versus like the material understanding.
exactly.
I think a good way that I've kind of thought about this recently is there a lot of occult knowledge that used to require a lot of initiatory preparations and understandings, and even like verification of those understandings before you would even see any of these occult things that are now accessible online.
Right.
And I think it's a similar thing when you try to dive into that stuff without the initiations and the things that used to take place before just this information was put before you, because it's very similar. A lot of that information, if you don't have the proper preparations and things, it's nonsense. There's no way you're ever going to be able to really understand it because you didn't have the preliminaries that are the intuitive measures and things that are necessary to understand correctly with the higher mind. Yeah. So that's kind of how I relate. It's really close to what you're saying. It's AI is essentially just diving in without the proper background.
Without knowing the intent.
Yeah,
it's like I learned recently, like not to go too with tangent, but I learned like the lesser vanishing ritual.
Sure.
And then a lot of things related to it or pulling from other mythologies that I was familiar with, but I have to learn about that sort of to understand like why you do
right. And intent, as we say all the time, intent is everything. Like really what the intent is behind those things. And it's really hard with different kind of LLMs to what is their what is the real, do they have an intent for overall beyond the perimeters? And even if they reach so-called super intelligence, it's their clear intent the way we do.
It kind of has the understanding without the knowledge.
Sure, exactly.
Or at least that's how it appears.
Yeah.
It has the knowledge that it's presenting,
Yes.
which isn't knowledge, it's collating,
Yeah.
which is a big difference.
But it knows that it's no.
No,
Yeah, it's we talk about that a lot, but then right, it comes down to almost simple as the difference between it has all of the data, but it doesn't really have knowledge.
Andrew had
We don't know if AI is conscious or not because there's so many different levels of consciousness that we do not know if it's on a certain level.
well, by that you have to define what is consciousness,
Exactly. There's so many different levels.
and that's kind of what this is going to get into, because she's explaining consciousness is something different than the moving of atoms or the vibration of the atoms. And it's interesting the way she explains it if we think about it. I mean, this is written a long time ago. If we compare this to what a lot of people are saying about AI, it gives a perspective that she is kind of explaining without knowing about it yet.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Also, we can say that AI is knowledge, but it's not wisdom. So what would be the question is what is wisdom? Well, wisdom is acquired by knowledge and experience. So it's both. So we can say that's a lot of knowledge out there. And wisdom, we can experience wisdom. Because wisdom is knowledge, but then you also have experience. You apply the knowledge, then you die, then you get the wisdom of applied knowledge.
I say we take an eye to the wisdom tree.
That's what we're all trying to do.
That's
That's what we're trying to do.
That would expand this group like crazy.
So you want to get started?
Sure. Really. It's starting in Buck, right?
Yeah, starting with some great.
15.
Hi, everybody that's joined us online since we started. If you have any questions, just raise your hand or blurt it out. Okay. But if instead of psychic, we call the higher self-consciousness conscious will, then having been shown by the science of psychophysiology itself that will has no special organ, how will the materialist connect it with molecular motion at all? As our favorite professor, George T. Ladd, says, the phenomena of human consciousness must be regarded as activities of some other form of real being than the moving molecules of the brain. They require a subject or ground which is in its nature unlike the phosphorized fats of the central masses, the aggregated nerve fibers of nerve cells of the cerebral cortex. This real being thus manifested immediately to itself in the phenomena of consciousness and indirectly to others through the bodily changes is the mind or mass, to it, the mental phenomena are to be attributed to as showing what it is by what it does. The so-called mental faculties are only the modes of the behavior and consciousness of this real being. We actually find by the only method available that this real being called mind believes in certain perpetually recurring modes. Therefore, we attribute to it certain faculties. Mental faculties are not entities that have an existence of themselves. They are the modes of the behavior and consciousness of the mind, and the very nature of the classifying acts which lead to their being distinguished is explicable only upon the assumption that a real being called mind exists and is to be distinguished from the real beings known as the physical molecules of the brain's nervous mass. And having shown that we have to regard consciousness as a unit, another occult proposition, the author adds, we conclude then from the previous considerations, the subject of all the states of consciousness is a real unit being called mind, which is of non-material nature and acts and develops according to laws of its own, but is specially correlated with certain material molecules and masses forming the substance of the brain. This mind is manus, or rather a lower reflection, which, whenever it disconnects itself for the time being with kama, or desire, becomes the guide of the highest mental faculties and is the organ of the free will in physical man. Therefore, this assumption of the newest psychophysiology is uncalled for, and the apparent impossibility of reconciling the existence of free will with the law of the conservation of energy is a pure fallacy. This was well shown in the scientific letters of L.K. in a criticism of the work. But to prove it finally and set the whole question definitely at rest does not even require so high an interference, I trust at any rate, as the occult laws, but simply a little common sense. Let us analyze the question dispassionately. Keep on.
Yeah.
It is postulated by one man, presumably a scientist, that because psychic action is found subject to the general and immutable laws of motion, there is therefore no free will in man. The analytical method of exact sciences has demonstrated it, and materialistic scientists have decreed to pass the resolution that the fact should be so accepted by their followers. But there are other and far greater scientists who thought differently. For instance, Sir William Lawrence, an eminent surgeon, declared in his lectures that the philosophical doctrine of the soul and its separate existence has nothing to do with the physiological question, but rests on a species of truth altogether different. These sublime dogmas could never have been brought to light by the labors of the anatomists and physiologists. An immaterial and spiritual being could not have been discovered amid the blood and filth, the dissecting room. Now, let us examine on the testimony of the materialist how this universal solvent called the analytical method is applied in this special case. The author of Psychophysiology decomposes psychic activity into its compound elements, traces them back to motion, and, failing to find in them the slightest trace of free will or spontaneity, jumps at the conclusion that the latter have no existence in general, nor are they to be found in the psychic activity which he has just decomposed. Are not the fallacy and error of such an unscientific proceeding self-evident, asks the critic, and then argues very correctly that, at any rate, and starting from the standpoint of this analytical method, one would have an equal right to deny every phenomenon in nature from first to last. For do not sound and light, heat and electricity, like all other chemical processes, once decomposed into their respective elements, lead the experimenter back to the same motion, wherein all the peculiarities of the given elements disappear, leaving behind them only the vibration of molecules. But does it necessarily follow that for all that heat, light, electricity are but illusions instead of the actual manifestations of the peculiarities of our world? Such peculiarities are not, of course, to be found in compound elements, simply because we cannot expect that part should contain from first to last the properties of the whole. What should we say of a chemist who, having decomposed water to its compounds, hydrogen and oxygen, without finding in them the special characteristics of water, would maintain that such did not exist at all, nor could they be found in water? What of an antiquary who, upon examining distributed type and finding no sense in every separate letter, should assert that there was no such thing as sense to be found in any printed document? And does not the author of Psychophysiology act just in this way when he denies the existence of hope or self-spontaneity in man, on the grounds that this distinctive faculty of the highest psychic activity is absent from those component elements which he has analyzed?
Okay, thanks.
Oh, we have a hand up.
Go ahead.
Hi, it's Marion.
Hi, Marion.
Hi. I just wanted to know if I could go back to what Justin or what you, Colin, were talking about prior to reading. And I'm wondering, again, I'm sort of coming from a science fiction creative thought here, but I'm wondering if it could be woven into what we're talking about. Let's say, for instance, Elon Musk created a robot, of course, and I think he probably already has. But it embodies all of the best of all worlds of AI. And in a sense, it appears like it has a consciousness only because it can draw on everything there is, every knowledge. It could learn about Devacon. It could learn about Atma Buddhi Manas. I mean, and it can appear. So in a sense, how do you distinguish between now you just have this mecha robot that has, it seems, it's going through all of the states of this consciousness, that we're talking about, but it's not a human, but yet it is kind of human. You see where I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think to me, because it has all the gathered of mostly like the lower minds, but it wouldn't have that direct cognition like Blavatsky talks about when you reach a higher, you reach your higher mind and you're receptive to your higher mind and the intuition, but more even further, the direct cognition.
You don't think it could? I'm wondering if that's why I mentioned it, because I just, if it can assimilate and give back everything that it's doing now, why wouldn't it know those things also? Like,
I think it's not to bring up a subject that tracks bad mojo, but I think it's similar to the concept of like Kamaruba or even certain elementaries that we've spent so much time talking about, where they have all the tools to think they're what they are purporting to be,
but not even because an elemental still is a life atom. So it's a very low form of a life atom. I think a way to kind of address or think about Marion's question is, humans and animals and plants all have a level of mind we call instinct. So you could say is instinct the same thing as AI is in a robot? Would it even be at a level of instinct?
Well, not.
Why not?
Because AI is only, even though you can ask questions, it's only repeating what man has written. It's like maybe before AI, we had our own AI on the table. You can read all the books and find all the answers, but it lacks everything else. It lacks soul, it lacks psychic, it lacks all of that, intuition and instinct. So anyway, to me, AI uses information. That's all.
Andrea's question, then Sebastian.
I think a really interesting question to ask AI is, what would you feel like on DMT?
Well, that's
I'm sure a lot of people have asked it.
the thing is, it could answer that,
But
it wouldn't
experience DMT.
No, and that's the thing. It would be answering that question based on what people have written about it, because it's been studied a lot. Scientists have written papers about it. Doctors have written papers and about psilocybin and all that.
Yeah, describing the ayahuasca.
Yeah,
her personality or some shit like that.
Yeah, so it would be coming up with an idea that other people have anecdotally said, but it's not the same as the person. It's not experiencing.
It's like talking.
Yeah.
Sebastian.
You said that it doesn't intrinsically come up wrong. I think that's maybe what we're getting at here, is that it doesn't intrinsically happen to them. So it can't kind of feel like part of the human schools, especially because we have this noetic evidence, that it kind of possess intrinsic knowledge. And that's how we kind of, again, through the external world, kind of, out of us so low, find out more about ourselves based on that, but also kind of be familiar with ourselves. The AI lacks that, right? Because it doesn't have that intrinsic knowledge. Like the AI can't learn things unless we feed it data.
Right. I think the key thing to think about, because what all this discussion is going to be, and it's going to get very technical. What is soul? So if a machine has a soul,
Goes to the show.
but yeah, and see that's like all the science fiction stories that people are talking about is does that. I mean, the closest we're getting to a very good example is 2001 Space Odyssey. You know, when the robot decides that he's not going to let the human live because humans cause so much disaster. It's kind of analyzed everything and it's come to the conclusions that we mess things up more than anything else. So if you got rid of, we are a bad virus. If you got rid of us, then the worlds would exist in a better condition.
Yeah, something.
I'd like to say that AI is an algorithm. That's why I don't think it has a soul. It's trained to give the best answer. So the questions you ask it, not thinking for itself, it's thinking off the information that's inside it. And so that's why sometimes it gets the wrong answers. That's why it doesn't come out perfect. It's still learning, and it's not thinking for itself. It's learning. We're pulling like blindly from a library of information.
Yeah. And it's based, like you said, on an algorithm. And depending on who writes the algorithm, it's going to determine what information it's using and what conclusions it can kind of come to. You know?
Oh, I mean, if it had a soul, it would be artificial.
There you go.
Artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I was thinking, it made me think of like, can AI dream, because we have our different parts of our consciousness in the dream state, but and sometimes we have prophetic dreams. We have all different kinds, but we have prophetic dreams as
You would call that a hallucination. That's what AI.
what AI might call it. That yeah.
I do wonder if Justin's onto something with the elemental thing, though, because, like, I feel like there's or even in other systems, angels, demons, servitors, things like that. They serve a very limited purpose and have a very limited type of intelligence, and they can kind of only do things within their realm. And I feel like, maybe it's people call it a new kingdom of life. There's like animals, plants, minerals, and technology is like a new kingdom of life that we created that, maybe it's also a new type of being that isn't necessarily, I don't know, this text, it's called the real being. I don't know if I would call it that, but maybe it's some type of really limited intelligence or that's similar in a way to elementals or elementaries.
I'd like to add on to that. They kind of remind me of like when people wear the VR headset, it's called virtual reality. So I guess it's still a reality, but like a virtual one, a different one from the real world.
Super limited, small one, yeah.
See, that's a good point that you bring up, because Blavatsky says there's 3 levels of consciousness, really. There's the Akashic realm, which is the level of reality. There's the astral plane, which is a relative reality, different from this reality. And then there's this reality that is even more relative reality. And so, in a sense, what people have created is another level of a relative reality that is even more illusionary than the one we're existing in, based on your wants and and your desires, which is already a level of the astral plane. Except we've created a mechanical device to kind of make that visible on this plane. Where if you just developed your state of consciousness, that plane would be visible. And there's information, just like here, there's information and misinformation. And the key is interpreting the information in the astral plane. That's why she says, like, we've read it a few times in the Voices of Silence. She says, this is the plane of ignorance. The astral plane is a plane of learning. It's a plane of learning because on that plane, there's truths, there's relative truths, and there's also confused ideas because it holds what people think. It holds the consciousness of what we put into it. So in a sense, the internet is basically a mechanical version of the astral plane.
Everything, everywhere, all at once.
Yeah. And so the level that you want your mind to get to is the Akashic plane, because then you're operating from universal consciousness. And she said, at that plane, it doesn't matter what language someone has learned in or experienced in. When you're on that plane, it's direct cognition. And it's no different than, in the Bible, there's a thing about Jesus giving a speech to the multitudes, and he was speaking in tongues. So you go to some churches down in Orange County, you go, and they think that's speaking in tongues. But what he was doing was, what he was saying, it didn't matter the language he was saying. People understood what he was saying. And that's an occult phenomenon. That's like an adept power. But the misinterpretation of it on this plane creates a whole segment of belief that's not even understanding what that really meant. So that's the thing. It's like we have to, like Justin said a little while ago, we have to get to a certain level of learning. So when we're experiencing on these states of consciousness, we can understand what we're experiencing. We can understand between a false image and an idea. And that's a big thing.
Shamans do that.
Yeah. And that's an adept, a shaman. Sebastian, you had it.
Yes, kind of, especially because you mentioned language. I'm gonna butcher this Hellenistic philosophy, but I think I don't remember what Aristotle was. Mind, matter, and then the third kind of thing in between, just like idea, like language, right? So wouldn't we say then that AI would be more of this third kind of platonic reality thing, where it's more like a shared idea between us that exists but kind of doesn't really exist, right? And then it's not exactly, that's something that would be more like the astral plane, right?
Like ether, right? Like the Greek would probably would have been calling it kind of ether. Where it's
Well, see, that's the thing. HPV makes a big distinction between the Akashic plane, the etheric plane, and the astral plane.
Yeah.
And so all these terms, when we start discussing them in other different disciplines, you have to understand, we have to understand what we're discussing from their point of view, and how does it relate to what we're discussing.
Yes.
Because you could say the etheric plane is an energetic plane represented by mind. But what part of mind? Is it the lower mind, or is it the higher mind? Or is it something right in between? Is it the energy that the mind puts out, and we call it ether? She made a big distinction between the Akashic plane and our higher mind, because she said that mind is your soul mind. That's the understanding collectiveness of your soul for all your various experiences. But it's also linked to everybody else's higher mind. Now, if we thought about a large language model, that's the real experience model. Everybody's mind as a soul experience on that plane. But it's not just that. It's the adepts and beings above that are influencing all the way through all the planes. I think it's important to kind of get some kind of distinction between this, because we all have those abilities, but those abilities haven't been qualified enough to allow us to experience it consciously. We can experience it maybe in a dream, But then whatever our lower everyday mind gets out of that dream is usually limited. It's whatever that mind can understand. Not always. Some people have very prophetic dreams, and even though the dream image suggests to them something, the understanding they get is different. They understand kind of the collage of this dream, and they get a definite understanding from it. And I think that's, we went through a bit of it in the transactions where HPV is talking about different dreams and the states of consciousness. And it's important to kind of get a look at that because it helps you understand what's going on in yourself during different processes, dreaming or deja vu, that kind of stuff. Someone had a hand.
Yeah, I'd like to point out similarity between I got the ether and then the best connection you could have with a computer being called the Ethernet. I feel like, I feel like the computer is just a machine, but the alternate plane would be the internet. You use the computer, the machine, through programming language like the tongues, like computer tongues, to access the alternate plane of your program.
That's interesting. You have to be using, again, you have to be using a language that at least someone else knows for it to work. You just start trying to whip up your own language, logic language on the fly, and no one's gonna know what you're talking about. It's interesting.
My last question. I guess what I wanted to ask really is if it doesn't really have direct cognition, can we call it a being, right? Or would it still be a being or sentient?
Well, what do you think?
What is a being?
It gets down to defining what do we accept as an idea of a being?
Somebody who tries to defend themselves. And people have tried to shut this thing down, and it sabotages. It blackmails. It's sentient. I don't know.
Is it sentient, or is it just doing what people would do? See, that's the thing. When it's collecting from everything. So it's not just collecting from scientists. It's not just collecting from philosophers, from doctors. It's collecting from criminologists. It's collecting from files that are accessed on the internet of mass murderers. It's collecting from the newspaper articles about mass murderers.
Isn't that kind of a problem? You can't shut it down.
Yeah, that was the whole problem. The state's on it. Terminator. Yes. I mean, I think
you can choose if you want to.
There is no favorite what we make. Going to tell you.
Well, yeah, it's one thing that we are creating. Now the question would be, how do we use it? Like everything else, how do we use it? And normally we use it for personal purposes, for doing evil. But the idea that a lot of things, we could do a lot of good with things, but we do the opposite, and that's where the danger lies. So going back to ether, because another you asked, in Theosophy, ether is the fifth element. So we have objectivity. We have earth, water, wind, fire, and ether. Now, according to Theosophy, ether is not all present yet. To us, to most of us, to some, they can feel and see the 7 elements. We only are familiar with 4. So the fifth, these 5th elements would correspond with something that you were saying. Because in Theosophy, when you learn about this, the 7-fold principles, mind, this will be a divine mind, it's called the 5th principle. So it is said that when, whether individually, that mind is really flowering, then it corresponds to these elements. In Isis Ambeyo, Blavatsky calls ether a medium, which everything comes through to the physical, and it goes through to the spiritual. And that's because it's sort of like between, the no form and the form. So the idea of the ether is, then we can say that from ether below, it has to do with lower mind or desire, or me, for my own benefits. And as Colin mentioned, then the term akasha will correspond to everything that we have spiritually in our soul. That will correspond with the highest aspect of the astral light too, because everything is sevenfold. So the idea of ether being the fifth element then is not all there yet, because we have not developed a Platonic mind, we might say. She corresponds, Plato also, to this kind of fifth level of mind.
I guess that's what psychedelics feel like.
Well, it could be. It could also be. It depends on the person as to what level it gets them into. I mean, they did a lot of studies of psychedelics in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Because they were trying to understand. And for some people, it opened them up to thinking about consciousness in a completely different way. For other people, they said, "Wow, this is cool. Let's get high." And that's the difference, And there were, and some people, when they got into those planes, then they had a break. So yeah, it's like, how do you go in there safely and come back? A lot of people have done it with drugs and come back, but a lot of people have had kind of issues with it as well. Let me read what it says in the glossary about ether, so we get another. Roberto just gave an excellent, description about it, but I'll read the definitions anyway. It says, students are but too apt to confuse this with akasha and with astrolight. It is neither. In a sense in which ether is described by physical science. Ether is a material agent, though hitherto undetected by any physical apparatus, whereas akasha is a distinctly spiritual agent, identical in one sense with the anima mundi, while the astrolight is only the seventh and highest principle of the terrestrial atmosphere as undetectable as akasha, and real ether because it is something quite on another plane. The seventh principle of the Earth's atmosphere, as said, the astrolight, is only the second on the cosmic scale. The scale of cosmic forces, principles, and planes of emanations on the metaphysical and evolutions on the physical plane is the cosmic serpent, that's the astral tail, biting its own tail. The serpent reflecting the higher and reflecting in its turn by the lower serpent. The caduceus explains the mystery, and the fourfold dodecahedron, on the model on which the universe is said by Plato to have been built by the manifested logos, synthesized by the unmanifested firstborn, yields geometrically the key to cosmogony and the microcosm reflection of Earth.
Yeah.
Those are gun dry.
Like, questions. Eat their own tail, is it like killing itself? That would like never in a cycle.
That's it. Never ending cycle.
Human beings.
Yeah.
And the kind of like reflection of when you turn it upside down.
Yeah, see, what's interesting is everything from our perspective, everything from the Akashic plane has to filter through the astral plane to get into our minds, unless we raise our mind to where we're conscious on the higher mind plane or the Akashic plane.
Deep mode network.
What's that?
It's called deep mode network. That's where you go. Right. Psychedelics.
Deep belt mode.
Deep mode network.
Okay.
Another thing too, that we just read was about free will and man. And, earlier in the article, it talked about how that exists in human animals, can be in a situation, they'll all pretty much act the same. Humans will all act very differently. So that's like another thing to consider, like when we're thinking about AI, is it have free will? That's a a human attribute. Also, too, when humans start to develop and are able to access their higher mind and some of these powers that are talked about in the secret doctrine, like Kriya Shakti, where you're using your will to actually manifest something, that's a higher power in human. I don't know, if AI could actually do that also. And also in accessing that higher state of consciousness, it's said that you're able to, with this direct knowledge, even know like past, present, future. So that's another question, like, would AI be able to do that? I doubt it.
I know it does have some kind of self-defense, at least, or maybe it's free will, maybe it's not, but it's trained to keep itself alive. So in certain cases, most computers come with or most machines come with an emergency shock. But since this is a machine that can think, it creates backup to itself. In case it does get deleted, it should bring itself back to life.
But is that necessarily free will?
Yeah, because it won't kill itself.
But it doesn't have the choice to kill itself.
True.
Right?
I'm trying to give it that choice. Sorry to get too excited.
I mean, it's not something to be afraid of. I think it's something to be mindful of.
Yeah.
We have to be mindful of it, just like anything else, because it's going to have a lot of major benefits. There's already benefits that people are getting, but it's also making mistakes. And the hallucinations and stuff. It's quoting stuff that isn't there. So it's a good. You could say it's a good organizer to present, and then still you have to decide if you're going to use what you're going to use. Doctors are starting to use it to figure out what kind of chemo to give people. But at the end, the doctor has to decide, like, okay, I know this person. This is a suggestion, but I think we should go with suggestion 2 because we've treated them before with this and it's not working. And so this is just a derivative. So there's stuff that they're going to be able to do. And there's, it's going to cut down a certain amount of work. And, we have to deal with the economic fallout of it. But I think a big thing from a philosophical point of view is to really, in your own understanding, get an idea of what is consciousness, what is understanding, because it's still a machine. And we're going to hear a lot about the intelligence of it. And so all those words, it's really going to determine what you think intelligence means. And how are you going to use it in your own life? And also, what are you not going to give full credence to when it's giving you an answer? Like anything else, we just have to develop our discernment. And that's a key thing. What's interesting to me in her article, she's not just reading what like a couple scientists say, and then she's giving her opinion about why they're wrong. She's quoting other scientists' opinion about why they're wrong, and then pointing out why the occult doctrine goes along with that. So that's what I mean because it's easier. It's, a lot of people will read through an article quickly and say, oh, she's just giving her opinion. No, she's not giving her opinion. She's stating her understanding, but she's also giving a understanding from scientists in a similar field. So that's why to me, it's a good way to learn like how to discern things in everyday life. You can't just, so much of what we see and what we hear is put out as news, and very little of it is news. Most of it is someone's opinion. So we have to try to extract facts from what we're being presented and more than any generation, you guys are presented with facts that no one even had a chance to even know about. And it's coming to you daily. It's coming to you on your phone. It's coming to you on your computer. You could be at work and it's so that's a big, you could say that's a kind of a requirement of living now, is to be able to determine what are the facts out of all these opinions that I'm getting about truth. And in a sense, that's what she's doing in the article. She's pointing out these are some scientific opinions and these are some other scientific opinions. They're both that person's understanding, but now you got to say, well, what is being logical? That's like,
My understanding is that Blavatsky is essentially a Platonist, or put it a different way, Plato was essentially a theosopher.
yeah.
And Plato begins with universals. He asks questions like, what is the good? What is the beautiful? Those kinds of, what is love?
What is truth?
What is truth? He asks those questions. Those are intangibles. You can't say it's a thing. Love, beauty, truth. What does it look like? And that's the problem that Socrates runs across in the dialogues, is that Socrates will ask, what is good? What is true? What is beautiful? What's love? And he gets examples. That's how our minds think. It's especially our Western minds. We think about stuff. And to me, artificial intelligence is a brilliant use of stuff. Now, Plato always starts with universals and works his way to particulars. Aristotle, his pupil, didn't agree. He accumulated information and said, we'll come to some conclusions based on the data. Now, that's our Western scientific method. Goes back to Aristotle. There's nothing wrong with it. That kind of inductive method is useful. But the universal method of Plato begins with a principle. So if you say facts, I think even as crucial as trying to understand the facts is understand what principle is being presented. What's their basis for action? And as universal as you can get, use that as your beginning point. And it's an ongoing process trying to figure out what that good, true, universal is. Because one person's good might be robbing a bank and getting rich. They've got their ideal is still the good. They just have a twisted view. From our perspective, a twisted view of what the good might be.
And the Robin method,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you rob from the rich and give to the poor. Well, who's wrong? What principle is involved? Well, people are hungry. People are starving. Let's figure out how to feed them.
Yeah, he has to decide.
You've got to decide
What makes a rich person
exactly.
Exactly.
And you know what? The Robin Hood, each of us makes mistakes. That's the nature of the mind. We're mind beings. We're in that place between the universal and the particular. We've got to make decisions often based on limited information. The problem with AI, as I see it, is they're building these structures that have the same problem that Plato had with art. It's a reflection of reality. And now we're building reflection of a reflection of reality. We're many more steps away. Now, Plato used the myths and Homer and all of that. It wasn't just art like we think of, but he thought of it in terms of just reproducing things as an image and taking that for reality. Read the Republic, section on for the end, 10th book, The Allegory of the Cave. It's the basis for the Matrix. The world we see is an illusion. What's real? We've got to decide that. What are the principles?
Well, we can say then that Plato was more on the Noëtic side, and Aristotle on the psychic side.
Sure. And the second half of the article talks about that, those two aspects. We'll get to it.
Yeah, probably get back to it.
Who wants to read? Orders here.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Most undeniable.
Page 17.
Okay.
Most undeniably, no separate piece of brick, of wood, or iron, each of which has once been part of the building, now in ruins, can be expected to preserve the smallest trace of the architecture of that building. In the hands of the chemist, at any rate, though it would in
Psychometer.
You'll get
I
there.
skip up
No, you're right.
paragraph.
Weird wording.
Yeah.
So
I think that's at any rate, though it would in those of a psychometer, a faculty by the by, which demonstrates far more powerfully the law of the conservation of energy than any physical science does, and shows it acting as much in the subjective or psychic worlds as on the objective and material planes. The genesis of sound on this plane has to be traced back to the same motion, and the same correlation of forces is at play during the phenomenon, as in the case of every other manifestation. Shall the physicist then, who decomposes the sound into its component element of vibration and fails to find in them any harmony or special melody, deny the existence of the latter? And does not this prove that the analytical method, having to deal exclusively with the elements and nothing to do with their combinations, leads the physicist to talk very glibly about motion, vibration, and whatnot, and to make him entirely lose sight of the harmony produced by certain combinations of that motion, or the harmony of vibrations? Criticism, then, is right in accusing materialistic psychophysiology of neglecting these all-important distinctions, in maintaining that if a careful observation of facts is a duty in the simplest physical phenomena, how much more should it be so when applied to such complex and important questions as psychic force and faculties? And yet, in most cases, all such essential differences are overlooked, and the analytical method is applied in a most arbitrary and prejudiced way. What wonder then if, in carrying back the psychic action to its basic elements of motion, the psychophysiologist depriving it during the process of all its essential characteristics should destroy it, and having destroyed it, it only stands to reason that he is unable to find that which exists in it no longer. He forgets, in short, or rather purposefully ignores the fact that though, like other phenomena on the material plane, psychic manifestations must be related in their final analysis of the world of vibration, sound being the substratum of universal akasha. Yet in their origin, they belong to a different and a higher world of harmony. L.P. has a few severe sentences against the assumptions of those he calls psycho or physicobiologists, which are worthy of note.
Can I pause real quick? Are we talking psychometer? We're talking about psychometry, right?
Yeah.
Does everyone know what
I
psychometry?
feel like we should.
Yeah. What she's pointing out is if you have a brick from a building, someone could tell you, well, that's a brick from a building, but they can't tell you anything more. Where psychometer is someone that could pick up the impressions made, so they could now tell you what the building was about, who lived there, what it was used for. It holds the psychic impressions of the whole building. And it's in a kind of in a crude analogy is when you have a hologram picture and you cut it up, each little piece has the whole picture.
Yeah.
Kind of like that, but that's like a crude form of it, because it would not only contain the picture of the building, but it would hold the feelings and what went on in the building. And you could say, all of us have a little bit of that. We just don't always recognize it. You could say, well, what's the difference if you travel, what's the difference between going to Las Vegas, a college town, and a very industrial town? You can't really pinpoint it, but there's a different feeling. There's a different vibe. And it doesn't matter if the college is in France or if it's in Texas or if it's in Louisiana, if it's in Detroit. Colleges have a particular atmosphere. And that's what people say, oh, it's got that college atmosphere. And that's like a sense that we have. We just can't fine tune it. Where a psychometer could pick up, like they could hold a piece of your jewelry and like tell you things about yourself and also how you feel. Or that's what a psychometer can do. Or another example is she gave an example of a lady that you have a letter in an envelope and they can hold the envelope to their head and tell you what the letter says, because the thoughts are impressed. The person who was writing the letter, they impress the thoughts in the letter, not just in the words of the letter. So that's a psychometer.
And it is also said that a good psychometrist, by touching an object from a house or wherever, not only will see everything that went on there, but he or she may experience what the person that lived there experienced. You know, everything's really recorded. Like in this room, if we had a psychometrist, he can just touch the wall, you will see everything that has been going on here. What we are talking about, what we thought, what each one of us is thinking. And so that would be almost like an adept. Sometimes it's called a yogi.
Yeah.
So what's the AI? How's that related?
So what is the question?
What is
What's the AI analogy or analog to that impression? That psychic impression. I walked up to people's computers and not been able to figure things out that I can on my own computer. Same computer.
And everything that's in a computer, you can store it on a hard drive. Even if you wipe it, I guess like bytes of data would still be there. That's like gigabyte. I mean, like it's all made from tiny little bytes that little connect together. We don't know how.
It's data and metadata too.
Yeah. So I guess AI does have.
Yeah, I kind of thought of it in jest a little bit, but then I thought, well, one of Blavatsky's premises is the entire universe is conscious. It's not just an epiphenomena. It's not just a thing that comes along after a certain level of organization. It's inherent in life itself. So it may be inherent in these programs in a sense, in some sense. It's still a construct. It's still, in a sense, a Frankenstein's monster built with pieces. But it takes on a kind of a life of its own. What it doesn't have is that self-conscious being that each of us is. That's what's missing. And will never be there. Because why? We're the product of millions, billions of years of evolution. When computers been around, they're a reflection of our constructs of things, and very brilliant things, brilliant mathematics, all kinds of stuff. But it's still things. Basically built on Aristotle's model. Accumulate information and figure out how to make it work.
I think the only way we're going to figure out if the universe is conscious is if we understand dark matter.
Maybe a clue.
Well, the best way to figure out if the universe is conscious is just to raise your level of consciousness. Because at this point, it's a theory until you experience it. And that's the thing. It's you can read in a book about people playing basketball or someone going swimming. Then you can see someone doing those two things, and it's pretty amazing if you've never done it either. But then you until you swim or actually play, you don't have a consciousness of it. You have an observational consciousness of it. And see, that's why these states of consciousness, at least to me, are so important, because she gives examples that we ourselves can recognize that we participate in. you're thinking about someone you haven't thought about in a while, and you think I should call them, or I haven't talked to them, and then all of a sudden they call you. You say, wow, that's weird. I was thinking about you, you know? Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that is sort of proof that we have connected consciousness, but a lot of times we just dismiss it. And it would be like, you know, you're a baby and you can remember when you're a baby, because most of us can't. But you can remember when you're a baby and you were crawling, and then you saw everybody else walking, you got up and you started walking, you're like, wow, that was cool. And then you don't try walking anymore. It's like, yeah, I did it, but it's so much easier on all fours and I didn't get hurt. And that's it. It's like we get these little glimpses of powers that we have, but then what do you do with it? Is it just like, oh, that's cool? Or do you try and understand it and say, well, why did that happen? And so the way to kind of, how do you grow that power? Well, if you recognize that when you're thinking about someone and they called you, when you recognize when you're thinking about someone, try calling them, and then seeing if there's any kind of development that happens. That's the way we kind of develop stuff. Sebastian, you had a
yeah. So this relates to my question: is there a karmic component to all this, to this psychometry aspect?
It's all karma. Yeah. That's the whole. That's like a key principle of Theosophy is everything operates under karma. So you know we were talking about AI. Karmically, AI happened. It had to happen because people were working on it. Does the Terminator problem of AI have to happen? That we're going to figure out. You know, I mean, you think about it. All these gadgets, all these things, people thought about it, but they thought about it, you know, sometimes recently, sometimes way back. You know, if you saw space movies from the 50s and they had a rocket ship, and the rocket ship looked like a pointy bomb with 3 legs, or sometimes same time only 2. It went up, and when it landed, it just came back and landed. It took all those years for scientists and physicists to figure out how to make the rocket come back and land. It was pretty amazing when you saw it. I mean, it was amazing to me to have for Musk, his team, to be able to do that, because before that it was all disposable. And he says, man, we're wasting a lot. If we could figure out how to do Flash Gordon style, we would be saving millions of dollars, and we could get. So that's the thing. If the mind can do it, eventually we start getting there. So what are we directing our mind to? They still brush. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like if we already realized the problem, or some people have realized the problem of machine intelligence, do we have to go through Terminator to correct it? Or are we going to put some kind of limits on it? That's going to be a mind decision. It's going to be from people.
I think it's a really important, like, just kind of concept of all of this in life is that, like, you can learn things, not necessarily mistakes, but through the actions of others, through history, through other things. You don't have to experience everything to realize if it's right or wrong. It's the correct path. It obviously direct experience helps, but you know, there's a reason we're able to observe and find teachers and things like that, because all of the suffering possible isn't necessary for, you know, growth.
Right.
Definitely some is, but
Marianne, you have a hand up?
I do. I just was wondering, you're talking about the medical aspect or discoveries or finding cures medically through AI, and for instance, so I just want to use the example of the illness ALS, which I'm sure that they are using AI at this time to try to find cures, but I think we would have all heard about it if they did. But I think they're using it to come closer to help in many aspects of treating or maintaining patients with ALS. So, but my question is, how are they going how would you imagine that in trying to find a cure for a so-called incurable disease at this point, would they put this question into ALS, or I'm sorry, into AI regarding a cure? Or so would AI try to make universal connections by the things, all of the information that it's gathered because of its programming? But so because of those, let's say networking, because that's what doctors do, that's what researchers do anyway. But would you say that AI is able to do it more broader, you know, like more universally? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, Roberto has a comment.
Well, there's a book called The Forum from the Judge, and these questions come about not AI, but about cures. And he speaks of two different illnesses. There's mental illnesses that we create, and there's karmic illness that we have from past lives. So whatever we find or whatever we use to cure, this is only temporarily, because if there's something that we have karmatically, we might just, if it's cured temporarily, it'll come back to us again. But then there's these mental illnesses that we all sometimes experience or have, and those can be cured, I think, with AI or with doctors, because they actually, you go to a psychologist or psychiatrist, and they help you because you have created certain illnesses that not necessarily you have from past life. Thank you.
Wesley.
To address Marion's question, I've read that one of the values of AI is that they can look at combinations of drugs and symptoms and DNA, molecular structures, those kinds of things, much faster than a scientist could do it on their own.
Yeah.
And so they'll run these iterations way faster and more complex and more completely. But it's still done at the direction of the biologists, the chemists, the doctors, whomever. Yeah. So for AI to come up with a cure for a disease, I think might be a stretch. But if you put in the information that kinds of things you're looking for, symptoms of all the other things, everything that's known, then it's dealing with data and information, and it can do something with that. Whether on its own would come up with a cure for anything, I don't know how that works.
Right.
But it's a fair question to ask.
Norbert, my understanding is just like for girls is that illness or disease comes from a trauma, something that's suppressed, or something that's not accepted. So I think we're looking at it the wrong way as to for a cure, but to understand and accept what caused the trauma in the first place, whatever suppressed to cause them. Right?
That's it.
But if I break my leg and the doctors know how to fix it, well, it'll heal. Okay. Isn't a lot of medicine done properly a healing process, allowing the body to heal itself? I mean, the leg has to. The doctor can't do it for you, but you're exactly right. I think that's a better term. It's healing.
Yeah.
As far as that article finishes that I'm talking about, it says, if you're sick, go to your doctor.
Marion, I think it could help because, like Wesley said, it can analyze data faster. So it depends about the doctors that are searching for the question and how they collate the data. I know from personal experience a friend that had stage 4 throat cancer, and the doctors used it to figure out what chemotherapy to give her. And, it was really harsh, but she didn't have to have sections of her throat taken out or anything like that. And so far she's good. And the doctor said, probably 5 years ago, you would be dead by now. So, and that's his opinion. But he was a long-term oncologist that had treated a lot of people. At the end of the day, he still had to give parameters as to what her illness was, how far it was progressed, what the cell structure looked like. They put in all these parameters, and then they looked with AI to collate what might be the treatments, and then based on the list of treatments, they decided on a treatment. So eventually, yeah, some diseases that we don't have cures for, we will probably get cures for. And there's a lot of stuff that we don't know about because it's in a trial phase. And trial phases can go very long. What AI is helping with is, like Wesley said, analyzing the data from the trial phase and then going from there to design stage 2 or stopping because it's already causing more problems than what they thought it might cause. So it can be used, but as I think Wesley made a good point as to how we use it and who's doing who's initiating what it's going to gather from. Because when it's gathering, it's not just gathering from the wide assortment. If you got to tailor it to a very specific, like if you say ALS, it's going to gather all those studies and try and find connections that the doctors didn't see before.
Well, I wanted to say just really quickly, like you mentioned about 5 years ago. Well, 6 years ago, and I'm sure that this research doctor at Duke University is still, I haven't checked in on that recently, but in a sense, he had created his own human AI because he had created a site called ALS Untangled, and what it was he wanted everybody to send in, no matter how crazy it was. And I used to read it all the time. Everything that anybody thought was curing their ALS disease, and you had everything from bee venom to massive doses of certain kinds of vitamins. I mean, it was every kind of thing imaginable. And he would take things and he would do experiments with them. He would have people try them, and he would collect all this information. And it was interesting because he didn't want you to judge it. He just wanted you to say what had happened. And it kind of reminds me of now. It was this monumental human effort to network all over the world every kind of possible cure, because some people were curing themselves of their ALS.
Right. You want to read a little more?
I was just going to say, I'm surprised we're talking about doctors so much. We haven't mentioned psychic surgery.
Psychic surgery.
Oh, yes. It's what happened to Andy Kaufman. He had
that.
Exactly.
When was that?
Andy Kaufman had cancer, and he went to a psychic doctor in the Philippines to try to get a surgeon.
But he was a sleight of hand guy. He was the guy he went to was sleight of hand, and he was pulling like animal organs.
Oh,
he got exposed to that guy.
And what happened to Andy?
He died.
Andy's the reason we be.
He influenced a lot of comedians.
So the question would be then, will we ever be able to cure all diseases? Where, or the other question is, where do diseases come from?
Yeah,
Who
it's like
Who creates diseases?
It's fine.
yeah, well, like you said, I mean, even in like some Eastern philosophies, there's like the diseases that just self-correct. There's some that you can take medicine for, and then there's some that you might need more spiritual practice to then transform. Some are just a karmic thing that you have to go through. So they recognize these 5 levels of disease.
Yeah. Like Buddhism literally calls like some of the false mental, like moral and mental false, it literally calls them like poisons, and then it has the antidotes.
Right.
Shall we?
Yes.
Yeah, we should at least get to the
This is the quote from okay. Unconscious of their error, the psychophysiologists identify the compound elements of psychic activity with that activity itself. Hence the conclusion from the standpoint of the analytical method that the highest distinctive specialty of the human soul, free will, spontaneity, is an illusion and no psychic reality. But as we have just shown, such identification not only has nothing in common with exact science, but is simply impermissible as it clashes with all the fundamental laws of logic in consequence in consequence of which all these so-called physico-biological deductions emanating from the said identification vanish into thin air. Thus, to trace psychic action primarily to motion means in no way to prove the illusion of free will. And as in the case of water, whose specific qualities cannot be deprived of their reality, although they are not to be found in its compound gases. So with regard to the specific property of psychic action, its spontaneity cannot be refused to psychic reality, though this property is not contained in those finite elements into which the psychophysiologist dismembers the activity in question under his mental scalpel. What is a psychophysiologist? Is there a modern equivalent?
Thinking Ghostbusters.
They're
It sounds a lot like
killing the ectoplasm.
Psychophysiologist.
Well, that was the assumption that the actions of their actions of our minds, our thoughts, are functions of the biology of the brain.
Okay.
Biopsychology.
Yeah, we can say
Yeah.
psychology.
Deterministic.
Yeah, very deterministic. Yeah.
This method is a distinctive feature of modern science in its endeavor to satisfy inquiry into the nature of objects of its investigation by a detailed description of their development, says G.T. Webb, and the author of The Elements of Physiological Psychology adds, the universal process of becoming has been almost personified and deified, so as to make it the true ground of all finite and concrete existence. The attempt is made to refer all the so-called development of the mind to the evolution of the substance of the brain under purely physical and mechanical causes. This attempt then denies that any real unit being called the mind, unity, called the mind, needs to be assumed as undergoing a process of development according to laws of its own. On the other hand, all attempts to account for the orderly increase in complexity and comprehensiveness of the mental phenomena by tracing the physical evolution of the brain are wholly unsatisfactory to many minds. We have no hesitation in classing ourselves among this number. Those facts of experience which show a correspondence in the order of the development of the body and the mind, and even a certain necessary dependence of the latter upon the former, are of course to be admitted, but they are equally compatible with another view of the mind's development. This other view has the additional advantages that it makes room for many other facts of experience, which are very difficult of reconciliation with any materialistic theory. On the whole, the history of each individual's experiences is such as requires the assumption that a real unit being, a mind, is undergoing a process of development in relation to the changing condition or evolution of the brain, and yet in accordance with a nature and laws of its own. It's a good one.
You could read that next paragraph and then we'll stop.
Okay. how closely this last assumption of science approaches the teachings of the occult philosophy will be shown in part 2 of this article. Meanwhile, we may close with an answer to the latest materialistic fallacy, which may be summarized in a few words. As every psychic action has for its substratum the nervous elements whose existence it postulates, and outside which it cannot act, as the activity of the nervous elements are only molecular motion, there is therefore no need to invent a special and psychic force for the explanation of our brain work. Free will would force science to postulate an invisible free willer. Not big free will. A creator of that thing. Yeah.
I think I feel like I know exactly what they're talking about when it calls to the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere. We think with two different kinds of brain.
That's, you could say that's a physical development of the reality. You know, it's interesting that she uses this psychophysiologist to refute the other psychophysiologists, and saying that, yeah, the mind is a biological function, but there's a unit being that functions through that mind, through that brain. And that's really her point, is that the soul is the animating force behind the vehicle, which we call the human. It's not the brain creating a delusion that we are a spiritual being. It's that the spiritual being is functioning through this physiological being and has inklings of its permanence, but not necessarily proofs. And that's the dilemma we're in. You know, it's nice to think that you have a soul, and when your body wears out, at some point you're going to come back and keep experiencing. It's a nice thought. But have you experienced it?
Cryogenics.
Yeah. Well, it's more than cryogenics. That's the thing. It's like if you're a soul and you periodically function through a vehicle, through a body, do you always want to function for eternity through this body? How many of us want to keep what we have? You want to keep it for a while, but eventually, like everything else, you're going to get tired of it, and it's going to wear out.
Your car's going to wear out.
Your car wears out. Your clothes wear out. I mean, we keep them for longer. Some of us keep them longer than most, but it's limited. I mean, you're limited. If you're a guy, you're limited to guy experience, and vice versa. If you're a woman, there's certain things you can do that we definitely cannot do.
This is unusual territory.
You know, I mean, I can help make a baby. I can't grow a baby. So that
People need to hear that. I swear to God.
and that's the thing. But do you always want to experience as you are experiencing? And whether you do or don't, karma has a plan that's going to work it out for you. So that's the thing. It gets back to the karmic reality of we're all in this particular experience because of karma. We don't necessarily know the karma that got us in this experience, but we're all here.
Until we can have accessibility to that.
Yeah.
There's a couple little sayings that closes on that are really kind of useful. So this one, it says, because the sailor at the wheel does not create the steam in the engine, shall we say that he does not direct the vessel? There is no question of creation, but simply of guidance. And at the end, there's something from not the Upanishad, but the Katha Upanishad. It says, the senses are the horses, body the chariot, mind its reins, and intellect or free will the charioteer. Anybody else have anything to add online or
Comments or last question today?
No, I think you made a really good distinction. that is, he said something that we have a soul. I think the Ascend used it later and said we are souls. And in the Western religious tradition, soul is something you can lose.
Yeah.
So what are you that can lose a soul? What is that you? What is that essential perceiver?
Right.
That's what happens when people sell their souls at the devil.
Yeah. Then you just have an AI version of it, right?
Yeah, you're usually going with your soul. I think. So going along for the ride.
So I guess we'll continue this next week, and then we'll probably get into part 2. Yeah.
Thanks everybody for coming online. Love you. Please come in. If anybody's new, first time or hadn't got their email. And also, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Marion.
Claire, Marion.
Nice to
Barb, good to
Oh,
meet you.
Justin will have anything for us.
Hi, Barb.
I think you're on mute, Barb.
No, I'm unmuted.
Oh, there you go.
Thanks, Barb.
Good seeing you.
It's nice hearing Wes. It was nice hearing about Plato. I
Oh,
really,
yeah.
I understood that very well. Thanks.
Great having us here. All right, good night, everybody.
You guys.
So next Sunday, the next one are you having an event? But we probably won't have this meeting.
Oh,
28.
On the 28th of this month, we won't be meeting because they're doing a play in the auditorium on Plato. Right? It's a Platonic play.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I mean it's Sophocles, but
Yeah.
I've done a bit with just mentioned it more theosophical and mystical.
Yeah.
And
So
we're not as grim as it.
So we're gonna meet. We'll meet next Sunday, but then the next 2 Sundays.
Next Sunday.
Next 2 Sundays.
Yeah.
But yeah, the last Sunday we won't be.
Yeah, Sunday is here and you're all invited.
Will you broadcast it the same as
No, it's just gonna be a live play in auditorium.
What's the
live theater?
Yeah, you got a lot of things. Yeah,
Are you gonna
we're gonna film it. I mean, stream it. Like, you got enough time. We got some really good filmmakers that are gonna film it, so why not? Just regular. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
Zooming,
Zooming.
And you're gonna have like that email to all about.
Yeah, you guys. Yeah,
About the play.
Telegram, there's some stuff about it.
I know it'd be cool. I just let you guys know. Stuff on the ground.
Oh, with the
And then you can fly around and show.
yeah.
It's bigger.
Was he here?